Dear learners, welcome to teaching learning session of sociology. In today's session, we'll discuss about scientific ethnography. Right. In our previous lecture, we discussed about the process of doing ethnography. We discussed about the ethics and emic perspectives. Right. Today, we will discuss about the scientific ethnography. Right. Scientific ethnography is what, as we all know, that B. Malinovisky was the first one who developed this ethnographic field, right? He is known as the father of ethnography, right? And this is based on the field work, right? It is required that that the researcher should live with the sample, right? Live with the population under study, right? It is one of the requirement to do the ethnography, right? And Malinovisky insisted that the social practices of these groups can be best understood through the emic perspective involving informants point of view, right? As I said in our last lecture, we discussed about the ethic and the emic perspective. Emic perspective is, if you remember, what is the emic perspective? Emic perspective is trying to understand the rituals, try to understand the society from the point of view of the insider, that is the emic perspective, right? And as per the Malinovisky, B. Malinovisky, he developed this ethnographic research, right? One of the main factor which is required to do this ethnography is that the researcher should reside with the population under study, and it is important that researchers should try to understand the society or the various structure and the culture of the society from the perspective of the insider. That is, it is required that they should understand it through the emic perspective. Emic perspective means it should involve the insiders participation as well as perceptions, right? During its infancy stage, right, researchers were devoted towards making ethnography a scientific approach, right? They produced manual for the researcher in anthropology. This manual considered of series of instructions informing about the process of doing ethnography, right? When it is at the beginning of this stage, at the beginning of the development of ethnography, right, a researcher produced the manuals in anthropology, and these manual consisted of what, a series of instructions informing about the researcher about the process of doing the ethnography, what all are required to do the ethnography. We discussed about the principles, various principles of ethnography, naturalism, if you remember naturalism, right? So one of the principle was the naturalism, right? So there were the various principles, right, on the basis of which one should carry out the study, ethnographic study, right? Okay. It was considered correct and precise than a description of those who travel longer distance for the field. The preciseness of this approach was not considered accurate for scientific experiment. So, see, preciseness is required, right? And it is required that researchers should move to the field area, right? But the preciseness of this approach was not considered accurate for the scientific experiment, right? Although there should be preciseness, but it could not be suited, this preciseness could not be suited for the scientific approaches, right? Scientific approach is basically a feature of positivism which can be tested independent of the researcher. We all know that positivist, as per the positivist, we can study the society as we can study the natural sciences, right? So social sciences, the phenomenon of social sciences, as per the positivist, we can study as we can study the phenomenon of natural sciences by applying the natural sciences rules, right? So this scientific approach is basically a feature of positivism, right? And this positivism can be tested independent of the researcher. That researcher, one of the main aspect of positivist is that researcher should be unbiased. They should study the objectives from outside, right? While at the same time there are naturalist aspects involved in ethnography. This naturalist aspects is more interpretative, as one of the principles of doing ethnography is naturalism, right. Naturalist means that it is required that the study should be conducted in the natural environment. Natural environment means at research study should be carried out at the place of population under study, where they can feel safe and secure, right. And researchers should move to that place and try to understand their phenomenon, various phenomenon of the society as per the environment and as per the perspective of the population, right. It is important that researcher can understand the basic reason or the perspective or reason for that phenomenon under the natural conditions. So naturalism or the naturalist aspects is involved in ethnography, right, while as per positivist it should be carried out objectively, right. It cannot either be verified by test. However, what distinguishes it from positivism is the fact that ethic perspective is an important consideration in it. The main aim of ethnography during those times was to provide an analytic explanation of other culture than testing the hypothesis, right. At the time when ethnography was at the initial stages, the main aim of development of ethnography is to provide the analytic explanation of other culture rather than testing it objectively or testing the hypothesis, right. So the main aim of ethnography is to explain the certain culture as per the perspective of the insider, and how the environment or how other factor influences or is responsible for development of that culture, right. What is the reason behind any particular structure, right, social structure, right. So the main aim of ethnography at that time was to provide the analytical explanation of culture, right, then testing the hypothesis. And in positivism or positivist believe that it should be that society should be studied objectively, and they should study through hypothesis, right. Malinowski established a participant observation as an important scientific method of gaining familiarity about various aspects of social life people under study. As we know that in 1922 that Malinowski conducted a study, right, and he established that it is required that the participant should be involved in this study. So participant observation, right, that it is important to involve the participants or to take into account the perception of the participant, and it is an important scientific method of gaining the familiarity about the various aspects of social life of people under study, right. If you want to understand the social life of people under study, it is important to understand their perspective, right. It is important to understand the participant observation, right. While structural functionalists employed ethnography as an empirical exercise by considering people's belief as real social fact, right. They collected this objective data with no or little interpretations, right. So they collected this structural functionalist, right, collected the data objective data with no or little interpretation. This type of data though has a qualitative orientation, there is no use of numerical data in this type of research. However, they encouraged and maintained the scientific spirit in doing ethnography by giving due importance to the fact rather than the interpretation. We all know that there are the two type of the researches, qualitative research and the quantitative research. As the name indicate, quantitative research includes the numerical data, right, and we carry out various tests to to verify our hypothesis, right? And the qualitative data, in the qualitative data, that numerical data is not involved, right? So this ethnographic type of research is a qualitative type of a research, right? And there is no numerical data has been involved, right? But this scientist encouraged and maintained the scientific spirit in the ethnography, right, even though it is a qualitative type of a research, by giving the much importance to the fact rather than the interpretation, right? That fact, there is a that they have given importance to the fact or the reason behind a certain phenomenon in the society rather than interpreting it, right? So they have given much importance to the fact, right? And the structural functionalist use the interview schedule as a mean of data collection rather than distributing questionnaire among the respondent, right? So in ethnography, the main tool to collect the data is interview, right, rather than questionnaires, right? Because in questionnaire it might be difficult when one uses a questionnaire tool to collect the data. In ethnography, it might be difficult for the participant to understand the question correctly, while in interview schedule, whether it's a formal interview or semi-formal interview or unstructured interview or structured interview, right, that they have certain that the researcher has a researcher can ask any type of a question instantly if it is unstructured type of a question, if they observe something, right? So they use the interview schedule as a means of data collection rather than the questionnaire, right? And this interview occurs in the natural settings. It is important. Why it is important to conduct the interview in the natural settings? Because the participant feel safe, secure, right? And when they are safe and secure, they can answer the questions easily. And the language, it is important to carry out the interview in the language of the participants or the population under study, so that there should be no difficulty in understanding, or there should be no misinterpretations, right? So it is important that it should be carried out in the natural environment. Interview should be carried out in the natural environment and in the language of the participants, right? While in the questionnaires, right, a different language can be used, right? And before carrying out the interview or the research, right, it is required that a researcher should establish a personal relationship with the respondents, right? There should be a personal relationship with the between the researcher and the respondent, right? And the information or the data collected through this process is considered a factual objectively. However, there is no way to replicate the entire process of data collection because of change in circumstances, right? So replication is not possible. Like in quantitative type of research, we can replicate the data, right? This is how we test the validity and the reliability of the data in quantitative research, while in qualitative research it is not possible to replicate the entire process of data collection because of change in the circumstances. As the circumstances change, there are the chances that data might change, right? Structural functionalist tradition of ethnographic research stress much upon the validity of data rather than the reliability of the data, right? So they emphasized on the validity rather than the reliability, because it is difficult to as I said, it is very difficult to replicate the data. So reliability, they have given emphasis on the validity of the data, whether the data is valid or not, whether the collected data, researcher has collected the data from the valid resources, right? While reliability is an important aspects in the scientific studies to replicate the experiment, we do the reliability to replicate the experiment to find out the data is reliable, can be reliable that data, and if data is reliable, we can generalize, it becomes easier to generalize the research, right? So ethnographic research cannot be considered scientific because the data is not reliable, you cannot replicate the data, right? there is a difference in the method of investigation between ethnography as a science and other social science and behavioral sciences, right. We carry out the researches, but the collection, the method of investigation is different in ethnography and other social sciences and behavioral sciences fields, right. The difference, what is the difference, like ethnography presumes that ethnographer need to explore in the first place the activities of people under study and the way these people justify the action with the reason, right. As per the ethnographic study, it is required that the researcher should explore the things and the activities, explore the things, the activities of the people under study or population under study, and try to find out they try to find out the why the how these people justify their actions with reason, right. So it is very, very important, right. And this study, this ethnographer study culture and people section through the systematically participating and observing how people do what they do, right. It is try to it means it is important that in ethnographic study, right, to understand, to explore and explore the activities of the people under study and the way the people justified their actions with the reasons, right. And this can be done through the through the systematically participation and observation, right, how people do and what they do, why they do what they do, right. And it can be done by the systematic study and the participations with the people under study, right. Many scholars do not agree with the fact that ethnography itself constitutes one of the primary tools of gathering information, right. And they believe in the objectivity of the sciences and claim that the presence of ethnographer in the community and his or her relationship with people under study may bias the result, right. So many researchers says, right, they are of the opinion that the presence of the researcher can biased the result, right, and it cannot be, and we cannot study the society through ethnography method, right, because of the biasness of the researcher or the presence of the researcher. Another aspect could be the presence of the researcher, right, could buy, and the relationship of the researcher with the participant, right, may yield a biased results, right. So as per them, as per many of the researchers, this ethnographic method is not a scientific method, right. Okay. Scientific ethnography comprises many key components, right, which are arranged in the conventional order, right. Scholars like Creswell, right, Berg have offered more precise explanation of the steps involved in scientific method. So, Creswell and the Berg offered a precise explanation of steps involved in scientific ethnography. So, first step is formulation of the research problem, right. Formulation of the research problem is the first step in doing the scientific ethnographic research, that is defining their research problem, right, what they want to study, right. So, the what is the research problem means, right, the research problem is focus of study which the ethnographer intends to learn about and explore, what phenomenon they want to learn about, what they want to know about that society or that population, right, what the ethnographer intends to learn about and explore, right. A research problem or a title which is well established attract the researcher because the researcher has a prior formulation title, read and analyze the literature related to the problem. So, first step is the formulation of the research problem, what the researcher want, what is the phenomenon which the researcher want to explore and learn, right, learn and explore, right. And then this well defined research title, because of this well defined research title, that researcher goes through the literature review, right. They try to find out if some previous work has been done, like previous work has been done on the similar type of the topics, right? And this literature review or the pre-existing literature enables the ethnographer to formulate the title that can be explored through various ethnographic tool of data collection, right? And this problem are studied in the field as they take place, right? Okay, and the ethnographer uses his prior knowledge problem to formulate a new problem for explanation, right? So prior knowledge, that is, the ethnographer uses their prior knowledge of the problem to formulate a new problem for explanation. How they use their prior knowledge? Because of the literature study, right? They use their prior knowledge to formulate a new problem, right, for studies. So the first step is formation of the title, right, for the study, right? Selecting the topic or title for the study, then selecting the research site, because in ethnography it is required that the researcher should go to the field and carry out the research in the field. So next is selecting a research site, right? The research is that is, research site means considering the population, right, or the field or population on which they want to carry out their study, right? That is, in general ethnographic rule, ethnographic research is conducted at a place where people interact with one another in natural environment or naturally, right? So it is required after the formation of the title, right? It is important to find out the site where the researcher should where the research should carry out, right? And it should be carried out in the natural environment. This is one of the main principle of ethnography, right? This make ethnography different from the experimental research, where we have control over the people, but in ethnography there is no control over the action and interaction of people under study, right? When we carry out the research, in laboratory, right, there is a this is known as the experimental research, that we can control the various factors, but in ethnography, where researcher has moved to the field, right, few things are beyond, in fact everything is beyond the control of researcher. They cannot control they don't have the control over the action and interaction of people under study, right? Ethnographers do a thorough review of the research site they want to select for the study, right? So it is important that they should have a knowledge about that, thorough review about the field in which they want to carry out the study. So the first is formulation of the title, right? Then selection of the site where the researcher want to carry out their research, and the third important point is gaining access of that site, or gaining access or entering into that group, right? So gaining access means formal entry into the group, right? That is, an ethnographer intends to study and explore. It is important that if you want to study about a specific group, right, it is important that you should get the formal entry. Formal entry means your entry should not be unwanted, or should not make the people under study uncomfortable, right? It is important that you should enter into the field or into that population with the consent of people, right, or the group, right? So it is important to gain the access of the formal entry into the group, right? In the field work, in this type of the study, permission is taken through initially participating in a group as a volunteer and afterward immersing a researcher, right? Or another method of gaining access is through a non-person who can advocate for an ethnographer's access to the group under study. So how can you do that? That one can enter into that group through the known person, or other could be, first it could be one can enter in a group as a volunteer and then can immerse as a researcher, right? And this ethnographic field work is not possible without having access to the people and their territory, right? If you want to carry out the ethnographic study, it is required that researchers should have access to the people under study and should have access to the territory, right? It requires a high level of cooperation from people under study, right? Because we want to understand why they do what they do, right? We want to understand the things or the society as per their perspective, right? So it is required that the high level of cooperation from the people under study, right? And once the access is gained, right, an ethnographer requires to devote too much of time in order to win the trust of the people and to maintain that trust throughout the process of research. Only gaining access is not important, right? Once you gain the access, then again the important thing is to win the trust of the people, and above all to maintain the trust through the process of research, right? So all these things are very important, right? So first is the first method was to formation of the title, right? Then second is selecting the field, then third is gaining the access to that group, fourth is presenting self to the group, right? Then again it is important, presenting self to the group means a kind of behavior an ethnographer tend to show towards his participants and deciding how to appear before them, right? How you present yourself before the population under study, right? And it indicates the role that an ethnographer play, right? So as to adapt to the environment of people under study, and also how to establish a relationship with others, right? How you present yourself, how you establish a relationship with others, right? It is important, presenting self to the group, right? That it is required that ethnographer should be polite, right, while interacting with the participants, and that the researcher should respect the time and space of participants and should follow the ethics, right? See, developing or establishing a relationship, a good relationship with the people under study is very important in ethnographic study, right? And it is required to establish the relationship, it is required in ethnographic studies that the researcher should be polite while interacting with the participants and should respect the time and the space of the participants and should follow the ethics, right? There are many the researcher faces many challenges, right? And this could add on the challenges of doing the ethnographic field, right? That it is very important that ethnography has to be conscious about the motives and agenda of conducting the research while becoming completely a part of group under study, right? There are many challenges for the researcher, right? And it is important that researchers should know or should conscious about the motives and the agenda of conducting the research, right? While becoming a part of a group under study, right? And the complete immersion in a group as well as complete participation in activities of people under study is important to obtain an inside view as to avoid difficulties while negotiating for the access, right? It is important. See, it is a challenge that the researcher should be conscious about the objectives, right, of the research, right? Objectives of the objective and the motives of the research. And again it is required that the researcher should be immersed with the group and should participate completely with the activities of the people under study, right? Why? To gain the complete or gain the complete inside view and to avoid the difficulties while negotiating for the access, right? So they follow very there are many challenges a researcher face in ethnographic studies, right? And then next point is data collection, information recording and field notes, right? So we discussed about the 4 points, right? presenting itself to the group, right? That is discussion, that is deciding the research title. Then after deciding the research title, it is important to select the field. After selecting the field, right, it is required that they should that how to that is, then again the step was to presenting the self to the group, and then the data collection. After gaining the access to the third was the gaining access to the field, then presenting self to the group. After gaining the access and presenting self to the group, now this is the time to collect the data and information, right, and make the field notes. Then only you can write the case, right, then you can do the case, right. Data collection process involves making a field notes. Whatever you are observing, it is important that the researcher should take the field notes, right. Field notes are traditional way of data collection in ethnography. It is a traditional way of collecting the data, right. The ethnographic finds it difficult to record and gather the data, right. So to overcome, this is the traditional method to get the field record, fields notes, and at times the researcher found it difficult, and to overcome this, the ethnographer must have a prior information about the kind of the data required, right. When you have formulated your problem, right, it is required that you should know what type of a data you need to carry out your research, right, which can be written in the form of field notes or recorded through the using a recording device, right. So what type of a data you want to collect, you should have a prior knowledge about that. You should be it should be clear in the mind of the researcher, right. And noting down the observation from the field immediately reduces the chance of missing any important piece of information from the participants, right. So collecting the data, and before collecting the data, it is important that researchers should know what type of data they need, and to do so, what they should do, that they should collect the notes there in the field, to avoid any sort of missing the data, right. Running descriptions, right. While you are collecting the data, while researcher is collecting the data could be, we can collect the data in form of running description. Running description means recording accurately what has been observed in a day. That is description, what has been observed in that particular day, right. It does not include any kind of interpretation or analysis what is observed, because such description are written while an ethnographer in the field and note down what is observed, right. So running description is, as the name indicates, running a description what all one has observed in the day, right. And it does not include, this running description does not include any kind of interpretation or analysis, right. What is observed, there is no need to interpret any thing about what has been observed, right. Analyzing the information while doing the field work may hinder the process of observation. When one started analyzing the information, then it could create a hindrance in observation. So it is important to observe the thing and take the notes of that. They record those things, right. There is no need to interpretation. So running description what has been observed in that day, and no need to interpret it in there and then only. Then next is forgotten events, right. They must include what has previously been missed by the ethnographer but recalls it while continuing the field work, right. These forgotten occurrences are noted because ethnographer find them important for the kind of research has been undertaken. So it is like what the previously has been missed by the researcher, and it is important for this, right. This information is an important source for analysis, as it can be included a kind of speculation about the action and relationship of people under study. So forgotten events are very important, right, because it is it includes what has been missed previously by the ethnographer, right, and it is important for the kind of research that has been undertaken, and this source of information. Forgotten information is important source for analysis, right? Analysis, as it can be include any kind of speculation about action and relationship of people under study, right? And these notes about the forgotten occurrences are sometimes important because they help an ethnographer to plan for further course of observations or about the specific issues which are important to explore. This could be a topic for further research, right? Or they can carry out or they can explore that point there and that, right? Then the personal thoughts. Next is personal thought, right? An ethnographer is supposed to record and note down his own personal thought about the subjective reactions of the informants while doing the field work, right? So it is required that in ethnography, right, the ethnographer is supposed to record or note down the personal thoughts, right? Personal thought about certain observation or the subjective reaction of information, right? This personal thought reduces a chance of missing or hiding any of the observations in the later stage of the research, right? Then next is methodological notes, right? That it involves writing about the techniques employed in doing ethnography. Methodological notes is the what all techniques will be employed or what all techniques has been employed in the research, right? Methodological notes, that how the research has been carried out, that there should be a proper methodology, which methodology has been opted out, right? Techniques, right? It may include the difficulties that an ethnographer faces in the process of data collection or the risk associated with the data collection technique that may be likely yield biased results as well as the field notes are written and the observations recorded. So methodological notes, that is the how the data has been collected, what techniques have been employed to collect the data, right? Then analyzing the ethnographic data, right? That analysis of ethnographic data start with arranging a data into units based on the themes, right? So then again, after collecting the data, it is important to analyze the data, right? And it starts with arranging the data, right, based on the theme, that as per the requirement one should arrange the data, right? Right, and this arranging of data into unit is known as coding, right? We code the data, right? That is which can be arrived at by reading and rereading the data so that they can be thematically be differentiated. So after collection of the data, it is required that data should be coded or should be arranged properly, right? There are two forms of coding, that is arranging the data. The first is indexing coding, which does not attach any meaning to the data code, and the second form is coding is open coding, which is done during the later stage of data analysis and in which become important to attach meaning to the data. So there are two ways in which data has been analyzed, that arranged. One is indexing coding, which doesn't attach any meaning to the data read, right? So this is indexing coding. The second form of coding is open coding, right? And it is required and it is important and required to attach the meaning to the data, right? Ethnographers collect a large amount of information for their ethnographic studies, right? So as to describe everyday lives of the people who have been studied, right? So they have a large amount of data with them. They collect the researcher collects a large amount of data, and the process of analyzing this data becomes very challenging for the ethnographer at times, right? So it is important for the ethnographer to understand the data inductively without any preconceived ideas about what has been studied, right? So it begins right from the moment data collection process starts, which enables an ethnographer to identify the various themes, guarantees intense analysis, right? It is important, right? What does it means? That it is important that researchers should know what type of a data they want to collect, right, as per their research problem, right? Because they collect a vast data, they collect a large amount of the data, and coding and the analyzing that data is not possible, right? So it is very important for the researcher, right, to understand the data inductively, right, without any preconceived idea, right? And it started with the process of the data collection, right? Then after arranging the data, it is important to writing the ethnography, right? Writing ethnography means that it constitutes one of the key components of ethnographic research, right? In contemporary times, ethnography is recognized by how it is produced in writing as much as how ethnographic data is collected, right? It is important that how data has been collected, but more important is how it has been produced, right? How it has been produced, because it should be produced in a way that the reader should feel like that he or she himself is in that field, and they should try to understand that structure, right? That ethnographer must borrow ideas from literal theory and contribute to ethnographic writing through rhetoric and other related field, right? The writing skills of the ethnographer should be very good, right? There is reflexivity in the way ethnographers write their ethnographies. We will discuss about the reflexivity in our next chapter. Reflexivity, that reflexivity is not limited to the realities grasped during the field work and in the course of data collection. It applies the process of writing also, in which ethnographers transform their personal views of social phenomenon into scientific text. So what is reflexivity? That it is important to collect the data. Data collection is important, but in ethnographic, the writing skills plays a very important role in ethnography, right? And it should include the reflexivity. Reflexivity is what? Reflexivity is not only limited to the reality is grasped in the field work, what they have observed and how they have collected the data, what they have observed during the data collection, right? But it also applies to the process of writing, right? That when the ethnographer transform their personal view of social phenomenon into scientific study, they involve the data, and how they interpret, how they involve, they transform, the ethnographer transform their personal views of the social phenomenon, right, into scientific test. This involves their personal view, right? There are many ways of writing the ethnography, right? There are many styles of writing, right? And it varies, right, how the data, and this includes how the data has been collected and represented. Because of difference in writing styles and different theories employed in the writing, different ethnographer can produce both complementary as well as contrasting analytical ethnography, right? So ethnographer, see, there are many styles of writing in ethnography, and because of difference in the writing skills, right, different ethnographer can produce complementary as well as contrasting analytical ethnography, right? So scientific ethnography, right, we discussed about the scientific ethnography. What is scientific ethnography? What all steps should be taken to make this study scientific, right? Crosswell has defined it, and there are the 5 steps as per the Crosswell and Bell. There are the 5 steps to carry out the study, right? Feminist critic of ethnography, right? See, a feminism can be broadly categorized into the liberal feminism, Marxist, and the socialist feminism, right? So it can be, we can categorize the feminism into 3: liberal feminism, Marxist feminism, and the socialist feminism, right? What is liberal feminism? Liberal feminism advocates for reform in the system and the promotion of practices and policies that will promote the gender equality. So liberal feminism is what? Liberal feminism represents the gender equality, that there should be changes in the process or reform in the process and the policies, right, which promotes the gender, which should promote the gender equality. That is known as liberal feminism. While Marxist and socialist or radical approach view the system itself is fundamentally flawed and unequal, and therefore advocated the radical structure change and overhauling of social institutions so that they do not discriminate against women. As we all know that Marxists, right, they are radical in nature. As per the Marx, that the system itself is fundamentally flawed and it is important, and because of the flawed system there is inequality, and this Marxist or socialist or radical approaches, as per these approaches, they advocated the radical social changes, radical structural changes, and that there should be the radical changes in the social structure and overhauling of social institutions, right, so that there should be no discrimination against the women, right. So Marxist and socialist or radical approach states that there should be a radical changes in the social structure or overhauling of the social structure or the institution, right, so that there should be no discrimination against the women, and liberalization advocates the reform in this system, right. There should be reform, there should be no radical changes but reform in the systems and policies so that there should be no inequality, all the genders should be treated equal, right. The so-called second wave of feminism, which began in US in 1960s and 70s in US and Europe, so an intense upsurge in feminist mobilizing activism and writing, including in social sciences, right. Feminism and positivism, right. We discussed about the eras of feminism while we were discussing the cases, right. In our previous lecture we discussed about the three eras, right, that is from 1920 to 1950, from 1950 to no, sorry, from 18 to 1920, 1920 to 1950, and from onwards, right. So this 90s, 60s and 70s, right, this one intense upsurge in the feminist mobilizing, right. There are the feminist methodology. What is feminism and positivism, right. One of the major challenges posed by the feminist to mainstream science and social science has been a critique to positivism. Early social sciences were modeled on the positivist principle of value-free objectivity, and this feminist posed that they challenged this positivism, right. This feminist challenges this positivism, right, and this, as we know, that the positivism is based on the principles of value-free objectivity, right, and value free objectivity, and this positivity science aims of collections of the facts and the truth, right, and research must be replicable and heavily valuable and reliability, that research should be could be reliable and valid, we should be able to validate the research, and this view of science implies a certain hierarchical distance between the researcher and the subject of research, right, and because of this there is a gap. This has created a gap between the researcher and the subject of research, right. We'll continue with this, right, in our next lecture, right. Till then, namaskar.
নমস্কাৰ আজি আমি নতুন এটা চেপ্টাৰ লকে ইউনিট লকে আগবাঢ়িবলৈ গৈ আছো টপিকটোৰ নাম হ'ল এপ্ৰোচেছ অফ ট্ৰেডিশনেল এণ্ড মডাৰ্ণ বায়োলজিকেল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি সো অলৰেডি আমি প্ৰিভিয়াছ ইউনিটবোৰত ডিসকাস কৰিছিলো কি বায়োলজিকেল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি কি হয় ইয়াতে আমি আৰু অকমান ইন্ট্ৰোডাকশন পাৰ্টত আমি বায়োলজিকেল এন্থ্ৰোপলজিৰ কথাখিনি আগবাঢ়াবলৈ লৈছো कि biological anthropology is a part of anthropology তাতে বেসিক্যালি আমি স্টাডি কৰো বায়োলজিক্যাল পয়েন্ট অফ ভিউ যদি চাবলৈ যাওঁ আমি ভেৰিয়েশন এডাপশন এণ্ড এভলিউশন খিনি চাম কি মানুহবোৰৰ ভেৰিয়েশন লাইক স্কিন কালাৰত হাইটত কেনেকুৱা কি সিহঁতৰ ভেৰিয়েশন আছে এডাপ্টেশন যদি কোনবা ধৰক গৰম জায়গাত থাকে তাৰ এডাপ্টেশনটো কেনেকুৱাকে তাৰ কিবা ধৰক তাৰ ফিজিক্যাল ক্যাৰেক্টাৰিষ্টিক্সত কিবা ডিফাৰেন্স আছে নেকি বা সিমিলাৰিটিজ আছে নেকি যোনবোৰে ঠাণ্ডা জায়গাত থাকে এইখিনি চাম দেন দ্য এভলিউশন পয়েন্ট অফ ভিউৰ পৰা আমি বস্তুখিনি চাম বাট এটা কথা ভাবিবলগীয়া আছে কি বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি সদায় এটা কোৱেশ্চন সিহঁতৰ ট্ৰাই টু answer the question that বিচাৰি থাকে কি how human evolve and why human differ from each other কি মানুহ কৰ পৰা ইভলভ হৈছে আৰু why human differ from each other আৰু বেলেগৰ পৰা human being কেনেকুৱাকে differ হয় তো obviously যেতিয়া আমি এনিমেল কিংডমৰ কথা যদি আমি কওঁ তেতিয়া এনিমেল কিংডমৰ পৰা হিউম্যান কিংডমটো হ'ল ফাৰ্স্ট ডিফাৰেন্স তাতে আমি এটা বস্তুখিনি পাওঁ কি আমাৰ ব্ৰেইন ক্ৰেনিয়াল কেপাসিটিটো বেছি দেন সেকেন্ড হল কি আমাৰ কালচাৰ আছে ইনস্টেড অফ বেলেগ ট্ৰেডিশনত হিখিনি আমি এটা ডিফাৰেন্স খিনি পাওঁ তো বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজিছে সদায় হিখিনি এটা কোৱেশ্চন বিচাৰি থাকে কি কেনেকুৱাকে আমি আগবঢ়াব পাৰো আৰু কেনেকুৱাকে হিবোৰৰ বিষয়ে চিন্তা এটা কৰিব পাৰো কিন্তু যদি আমি সেম ট্ৰেডিশনালি বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি যদি কথা ক'ব যাওঁ এটা এট দ্যাট টাইম বা এতিয়াও আমি যদি কওঁ কি আমি কিছুমান বস্তু লাইক মই যেতিয়া আগতে ক'লোৱে অলৰেডি কি ভেৰিয়েশন পাওঁ ইন হিউম্যান বিঙৰ কিছুমান ভেৰিয়েশন থাকে এই ভেৰিয়েশনবোৰক আমি মেজাৰ কেনেকুৱা কৰোঁ তো মেজাৰ কৰিবলৈ আমাৰ কিছুমান ইনস্ট্ৰুমেন্ট আছে এন্থ্ৰোপোমেট্ৰি মেজাৰমেন্ট আমি কৰিব পাৰো আৰু মৰ্ফোলজিক্যাল ক্লাসিফাই কৰিব পাৰো তো মৰ্ফোলজিক্যাল ক্লাসিফিকেশনৰ ওপৰত অন ডেট বেস কৰি কিনে আমি ক'ব পাৰিম or বা sometimes আমি জেনেটিক্যাল কিছুমান নলেজ খিনি লম বা জেনেটিক্যাল কিছুমান টেস্ট কৰিম এইখিনি বেস কৰি আমি ক'ব পাৰিম but this field use knowledge from anatomy or basically যেতিয়া আমি biological anthropology উপৰ গুৰুত্ব দিম তেতিয়া আমি আন এটা কথা দিব লাগিব কি যেহেতু আমি কৈছো কি human being are differ from other like the variation adaptations and evolution যদি এইখিনি বস্তু হিহঁতে যদি বেলেগৰ পৰা differ হয় তেতিয়ালে আমি হিহঁতৰ knowledge খিনি চাব লাগিব the field use the knowledge from anatomy খিনি চাম genetics খিনি চাম physiology খিনি চাম and evolutionary খিনি চাম এই চাৰিটা প্যাৰামিটাৰৰ থ্ৰুদি আমি ক'ব পাৰিম কি how they are differ from other then আৰু এটা কথা ক'ব পাৰি যদি আমি প্ৰিহিষ্ট্ৰি লকে যাওঁ about 500 years ago তেতিয়া আমি কম কি মেইন ফোকাস অন ফসিলস এন্ড ফিজিক্যাল ডিফারেন্সেস কারণ আগৰ ৰেকৰ্ডটো আমাৰ হাতত নাই কিন্তু আমি যেহেতু প্ৰিহিষ্টৰিক পিৰিয়ডত যদি যাওঁ তেতিয়া আমি ফসিলস ৰেকৰ্ড খিনি পাম থ্ৰু দ্য ফসিলস ৰেকৰ্ড আৰু ফিজিক্যাল ডিফারেন্সেস এই ফসিল যোন জীৱাশ্ম খিনি আছে তাৰ পৰা আমি কিছুমান আইডিয়া খিনি ল'ব পাৰিম দেন আজিকালি মডাৰ্ণ যুগত আমি আৰু এটা বস্তু চাব পাৰিম কি মডাৰ্ণ সাইন্টিফিক কিছুমান টেকনিক আছে থ্ৰু দ্যাট টেকনিকেৰ থ্ৰু দিও আমি বস্তুখিনি কিছুমান আইডেন্টিফাই কৰিব পাৰিম লাইক যদি আমি মডাৰ্ণ টেকনিকৰ কথাখিনি কওঁ তেতিয়ালে আমাৰ টেকনিকখিনি আহিব লাইক ডিএনএ এনালাইসিস ডিঅক্সিৰাইবোনিউক্লিক এসিড এনালাইসিস এন্ড কিছুমান আমি ইন্টাৰডিসিপ্লিনাৰী ৰিসাৰ্চ কৰিব লাগিব the study of human evolution and the variation has become more scientific and accurate তো biological anthropology যিখিনি ডেটা দিয়ে সেই ডেটাখিনি অথেন্টিক থাকে because it's more scientific and accurate because most of the things যিখিনি আমি ৰিজাল্ট খিনি পাম সেই ৰিজাল্ট খিনি scientifically হ'ব then it was just a overall asile ki introductory part of bostukhini tenekwaake যদি আমি আন এটা কথা ক'বলৈ যাওঁ লাইক মিনিঙৰ কথাখিনি কি মিনিং অফ বায়োলজিকেল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি তো তেতিয়াহ'লে আমি আৰু এটা কথা গম পাম আন এটা কথা আৰু গম পাম কি লাইক বায়োলজিকেল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি ইজ এ ব্ৰাঞ্চ অফ এন্থ্ৰোপলজি that studies basically human biological organism or বিষয় study করে and it focus on human evolution physical characters genetic variation growth and development and adaptation to the environment. It also studies fossils of early human and compares human with other primates to understand human origin and biological diversity. ইয়াতে আমি আন এটা বস্তু আৰু এটা পাম কি খালি early human and compares human with other primate. ইয়াত খালি ভেৰিয়েশ্যন জেনেটিক ভেৰিয়েশ্যন গ্ৰোথ এণ্ড ডেভেলপমেণ্টটোৱে ষ্টাডি নকৰে প্ৰাইমেটছৰ বিষয়ে ষ্টাডি কৰে আৰু কম্পেয়াৰ কৰে যিবোৰ আৰ্লি ফচিলছ আছিলে আৰ্লি ফচিলছ অফ হিউমেন তাৰ লগত কম্পেয়াৰ উইথ দি আদাৰ প্ৰাইমেটছ কিয় কৰে বিকজ যেতিয়া আমি ফচিলছ ৰেকৰ্ডক প্ৰাইমেটৰ লগত যেতিয়া আমি কম্পেয়াৰ কৰিম তেতিয়া আমি তাৰ অৰিজিনখিনি আৰু বায়'লজিকেল কিমান ভেৰিয়েশ্যন আছে এইখিনি কথাখিনি আমি গম পাম then ahile scope of biological anthropology ami janu ki biological anthropology scope to vast hoy and multidisciplinary and basically ami aneta kotha gom pao ki evolution khinio pohe genetic growth and development racial population variation and the biology of primates to understand our place in the natural world আন এটা কথা মন দিব লাগে ইয়াতে কি যেহেতু মই ক'লো কি হোৱাইট বহুত ষ্টাডি কৰে স্কোপটো বহুত ভাষ্ট হয় মাল্টিডিসিপ্লিনাৰী হয় তাতে আমি জেনেটিক গ্ৰোথ ডেভেলপমেণ্ট ৰেচিয়েল ক্লাছিফিকেশ্যন এইখিনি বস্তুখিনি আমি ষ্টাডি কৰোঁ তাৰ লগত biology of primates to understand our place in the nature world and যেতিয়া আমি স্কোপটো পঢ়িম বায়োলজিকেল এন্থ্ৰোপলজিত তাত আমি আৰু এটা বস্তুক আমি এড কৰি লওঁ ফৰেনচিক এন্থ্ৰোপলজি ফৰেনচিক এন্থ্ৰোপলজিৰ হেল্পটো লোৱাৰ কাৰণটো হ'ল কি তেতিয়াহ'লে আমি লিগেল ইনভেষ্টিগেশ্যন ফৰেনচিক এন্থ্ৰোপলজিৰ হয়নো কি ইটছ এ বায়োলজিকেল নলেজ টু লিগেল ইনভেষ্টিগেশ্যন কি লিগেল লাইক কেতিয়াবা আমি দেখা পাওঁ মাৰ্ডাৰ কেছ বা কিছুমান CID ইনভেষ্টিগেশ্যনত এই লিগেল ইনভেষ্টিগেশ্যন যেতিয়া আমি কৰোঁ এই কেছবোৰত তেতিয়া আমি হেল্প লওঁ ফৰেনচিক এন্থ্ৰোপলজি এজ আই টল্ড ইউ অলৰেডি মই ক'লোৱে কি বায়োলজিকেল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি হ'ল বেচিকেলি দ্য বায়োলজিকেল পাৰ্ট genetics evolution growth and development তো হি তাতে role আছে legal investigation in the forensic anthropology আৰু হি কি কৰে basically আমাক adapt to different environment and ecological condition and provides insight into health nutrition and disease pattern আৰু এটা বস্তু আমি দেখা পাওঁ ইয়াতে health nutrition and disease pattern khini to yate study koriba laga hoy at the same time it also explore the history of human ki manuhor itihas tu ki kor pora evolution hoise kor pora ahile tracing line tu ki aro তেখেতৰ যে এভিডেন্স খিনি আছে এটো কি কম্বাইনিং এভিডেন্স ফ্ৰম বায়োলজি জেনেটিক্স এণ্ড বিহেভিয়ৰাল সায়েন্স আমি গম পালো ইয়াতে গোটেইখিনি ইটস আ কম্বিনেশ্যন অফ বায়োলজি জেনেটিক্স এণ্ড বিহেভিয়ৰাল সায়েন্স both from past and present pastor price as I already mentioned that pastor যোনবোৰ আমাৰ ফসিলছ ৰেকৰ্ড আছিল তাৰ পৰা আৰু কিছুমান বস্তুক আমি কম্পেয়াৰ কৰিছো প্ৰাইমেটছৰ পৰা then get the result So this is all about the scope of biological anthropology. Then যদি আমি কবলৈ বিচাৰো যেটা আমি কৈছো অলৰেডি কি আমাৰ স্ট্ৰেছ খিনি দিয়া হ'ব evolution of approaches in biological anthropology কি কৰ পৰা আহিল কেনেকাকে ইভলভ হল যেতিয়াৰ পৰা আমি ৰেকৰ্ডছ ৰাখা ষ্টাৰ্ট কৰিলো তো 19th century আমি গম পালো कि biological anthropology basically focus on anatomy, skull, shapes, bones and body measurement. And it will be classified into human into races. So bone to আমি study করি বোনটো আমি ষ্টাডি কৰিম আৰু তাৰ লগত আৰু এটা বস্তু মই চাব লাগিব কি যেতিয়া আমি বোন ষ্টাডি কৰিম স্কাল ষ্টাডি কৰিম এনাটমি ষ্টাডি কৰিম তাৰ লগত আমি সব বস্তুৰ মেজাৰমেন্ট লৈ থব লাগিব সেইটো এটা মোস্ট ইম্পৰ্টেন্ট থিং দেন আমি আহিলো আৰ্লি এন্থ্ৰোপলজিষ্টে সদায় বিলিভ কৰে early anthropologists always believe that race were fixed and paid little attention to evolution or environmental factors. So early anthropologists সদায় এটা বিশ্বাস ৰাখিছিলে এটা বিশ্বাস আছিল কি নহয় আমি বেসিক্যালি মোর স্ট্রেস দিব লাগিব কিছুমান environmental factor ওপৰত and this changed with S.L. Washburn. S.L. Washburn কৈছিলে কি যেতিয়া আমি environmental factor ওপৰত আমি stress দিম অকমান attention দিম তেতিয়া এটা new physical anthropology evolve হ'ব আৰু তেখেতৰ মতে 1951 start হ'ল then which emphasize genetics and primates behavior in studying human evolution. Modern biological anthropology use a biocultural and evolutionary approach. Our modern traditionally tami gom palo ki amar stress dibo lagisile evolution pointer aru environmental factor ki jibur holoni hoi goise ba hoi ase from traditional point of view para modern point of view he colonyবোৰ কি environmental factorৰ কাৰণে হৈ আছে নেকি যদি environmental factorৰ কাৰণে হৈ আছে তেতিয়ালে এটা new era আহিব and this change S.L. Washburn কৈছিলে কি new physical anthropology 1951 Junto basically emphasized genetics and primates behavior in studying human evolution. Modern biological anthropology uses biocultural approach and evolutionary approach. So modern bude ajikali basically biocultural or evolutionary approach study kori ase aba emphasize dias and eta bostule aru eta mon dibo lagibo ki it use genetic research ki amar tar genetical research to kom hoy come hoar karan to hall ki because the facilities should take time and many more pros and cons are there then primate studies and fossils evidence sorpora ami eta বিখ্যাক ৰাখি কিনে এটা বেস পয়েন্ট ৰাখি কিনে আমি বাকিবোৰ স্টাডি কৰিব লাগে traditional approaches in biological anthropology traditional যেটা কইছো কি traditional and the modern the traditional আছিল Traditional approach, biological anthropology focus on observable and measurable human trait. Traditional কি আছে তেহঁতে কিবা এটা বস্তুক অবজার্ভ কৰিছে অবজার্ভ কৰি মেজার কৰি আইডেন্টিফাই কৰিছিলে but these methods rely on physical characteristics as I told you that traditional method কিবা তাৰ এটা বেসলাইন থাকিব লাগিব ষ্টাডি কৰিবলা তো তেখেতসকলে baseline বনাইছিলে like body shape, facial features, skin colors, blood groups to understand the variation within and between populations. Traditional approaches are important because they are simple, cost effective and provides direct evidence of human diversity. Tamia, he major scholars several important scholars contribute correctly for the traditional approaches biological anthropology. John Frederick he was basically a father of physical anthropology. John Frederick Blumenbach, father of physical anthropology, and introduced early racial classification based on physical trait. আৰু তেখেতে কৈছিলে যিবোৰ based on physical trait ওপৰত কৰা হ'ব. And Paul Boraco contribute to craniometry and develop method for measuring the skull and the brain which help in studying human variation. আমি traditional perspective তো গম পালো কি আমি traditional timeৰ কিছুমান approaches খিনি চাব লাগিব তে approaches to চাবলৈ আমি কি কৰিব লাগিব as per John Frederick তেখেতে কৈছে কি Paul Boraco also said that it should be contributed to a craniometry and develop the brain. That is the foremost important task. And that drawings provide a number of gathered information. Like ইয়াতে কৈছে আৰু এটা কথা কৈ দিয়া হৈছে কি ডারউইন প্রভাইড দি থিওরি অফ হিউম্যান এভলিউশন অফ ন্যাচারাল সিলেকশন কি ডারউইনৰ থিওরি যোনটো এই থিওরি মতে কি নেচার ওয়াজ সিলেক্টেড নেচারে সিলেক্ট কৰে দেন যদি আমি হুটনলৈকে আহো তো হুটনে আকৌ কিবা এটা wait cover. The Houghton basically conducted extensive anthropometric studies and classified laid for the foundation of scientific study of human variation and evolution. Houghton কৈছে কি যদি আপনি স্টাডি কৰিব বিচাৰিছে যদি আপনি জানিব বিচাৰিছে তেতিয়াহলে স্কলার কেটা laid the foundation for the scientific study. That is the foremost important task. And study of human variation and evolution, although some of their racial classification are now considered outdated. So Houghton and Paul Boraco and others, those who are the biological anthropologists, say at that time, it's very difficult to classify on certain stages. So কিছুমান স্টেজত আমি যেতিয়া ক্রেনিওমেট্রিক ডিভিশন খিনি কৰি দিম তেতিয়া এটা মানে এই প্রবলেম আমি দেখা পাই থাকো বাট whatever Houghton also conducted the extensive একদম রিমোট এরিয়াবোৰত Houghton স্টাডি কৰিছিলে আৰু স্টাডি কৰি তেখেতে ক্রেনিওমেট্রি এক্সটেন্সিভ ক্রেনিওমেট্ৰিৰ কামখিনি আগবঢ়াই লৈ গ'ল Then আমি ইয়াতে কিছুমান characteristics of traditional approach কি আগৰ দিনত কিছুমান traditional approach আছিলে He traditional approach kini kenik wake. The traditional approach in biological anthropology basically emphasize on classification of human মানুহৰ ভাগ কৰি দিছে আগতে তো আমি জাস্ট স্টাডি করো as a whole এখন in this point that they will be classified it, the humans and the classifies that relay mainly careful observation and physical traits and analysis skeleton remain সিহঁতে আৰু এটা বস্তু চাব that is basically analysis physical analysis and skeleton remains kinisa and method is largely descriptive সিহঁতে ইচ্ছাকে that largely the method is largely descriptive focusing on the main physical areas. Then as a skull shape the body proportion and skin color traditional approaches popularization that proportion and skin care traditional approach prioritize classification তো যিবোৰ ট্ৰেডিশনাল টাইমত আছিলে ইহঁতে কিছুমান approaches খিনি দিয়া হয় body proportion and skin color and approaches is given the racial classification genetics environmental evolutionary explanation of human variation while it provides a valuable data কিছুমান valuable data দিয়ে about population differences is limited in explaining the underlying focus anthropometry data measurement of use code for the measurement of various racial index body index so kami study kodo to on that time ami ekhine loi jam anthropometry is the scientific study measures of the human body including height weight body proportion physical growth pattern anthropometry has been used for more than 150 years and follow the anthropometric to compare the population across times and indigenous it also help and across time to time and it will also help the studying the adaptation of different environment তার লগত আন এটা বস্তু হেল্প কৰে এন্থ্ৰোপোমেট্ৰিয়ে কি আমি যিকোনো লোকেশন এৰিয়া বোৰত মানুহৰ গ্ৰোথ এন্ড ডেভেলপমেন্ট height it should also matter so on that time what they are doing that it also helps in studying adaptation and different environmental conditions তো anthropometry তো আমি গম পালো কি এটো হল importance of anthropometry next we know that the importance of anthropometry कि yes anthropometry বা contribution আছে কিনা study growth and development patterns and analyze change from ancient to modern human তো আমি যদি চাবলৈ যাও at the time of paleolithic or 100 years ago from that times to now we have to show that certain changes like anthropometry is also provide baseline data for medical research ergonomics and forensic identities तो याद हम देखा पालो basically they are given the focus on the research and innovative ideas then subfields there are 5 subfields of anthropology first is measure the overall body of living organism they should measure and measure the overall body of a living organism, and the focus on head and facial, and measure the bone and population comparison. So we have seen that anthropometry is what measurement device, and second is focus. Third is focus on the head and the facial features. कि ए facial खिनी ना through anthropometry माप लो हाँ. Then आनेटा আহিব कि bones for population comparison. এই আমার হাতৰ টিবিয়া ৰেডিয়াছ আলনা যত জি আছে সেই বোন কেইটাক আকৌ ইহঁতে কি কৰে মানে মেজারমেন্ট কৰিব আৰু এই মেজারমেন্ট কৰি কম্পেয়াৰ কৰিব আগৰটোৰ লগত কি আগবাঢ়িছে কি বাঢ়া নাই বা ষ্টেগনেন্ট হৈ আছে বা কিবা সলনি হৈছে নেকি এইখিনিও ষ্টাডি কৰিব তাৰ লগত আন এটা আমি চালো ক্ৰেনিওমেট্ৰি basically studied about skull and teeth. Skull and teeth are study to basically करे होते साय. तो याते अहिले basically जिथे अपना गंपा anthropometry केटमान सब डिवीजन हो गल साइटा मन हो गल somatometry cephalometry, osteometry, craniometry. So these are the sub branches of anthropology, sub branches of physical anthropology. Then from last time onwards in the previous slides we have discussed about monetary, but that is not a basic deal. The deal is that how much they will adjust. Then by comparing the somatrometric data from different religion or ethnic group, researchers can identify adaptation to climate, nutrition and classify. So on that time only that they identify the climate and nutrition, lifestyle, etc. The next another pillar that is seriology. আমি আনটা বস্তু চাব পাৰি seriology to হয় কি a characteristics of a blood, particularly blood groups such as A, B, O, RH and MN system. So seriology part of আমি আনটা বস্তু গম পাম that is blood, particularly the blood groups A, B, O, RH and MN system to. তো এইখিনিও বস্তু আমি লগ লাগি কৰিব পাৰি. Then ahile traditional dermatographics and traditional methods. When we are saying about dermo, that how they are work in a loops, in a hole, or in a develop the womb of mother. And anata kotha se yata ki this platform influence body generate and the placement assessment, genetics and the present environment. Then importance of dermatographics, you can that dermatographics has been anthropology that helps the anthropologists identified population in different studies. So genetic যেতিয়া আমি dermatographics স্টাডি কৰিম তাৰ মানে different dermatographic মানে এৰিয়াত গৈ কিনে আমি যেতিয়া স্টাডি কৰিম ফিংগাৰপ্ৰিন্ট প্লাম সোল খিনি স্টাডি কৰিম তেতিয়া অবভিয়াসলি আমি কিছুমান ভেৰিয়েশন পাম. সেই ভেৰিয়েশন পাম বা কিছুমান বেমাৰ পাম, ডিসঅর্ডার পাম. Analyze the microevolutionary approach. So we have seen sometimes in the news at all that the people they give the reserve, or they wanted to analyze the microevolutionary perspective. Then it also widely used in forensic identification, as when the identical twins have unique fingerprints pattern. Twins have unique that fingerprint pattern. Then limitation. That কিবা ট্রেডিশনাল খিনি যে আমি পঢ়ি আহিলো from past to present, তার কিবা লিমিটেশন আছে নেকি? যদি আছে তো লিমিটেশনটো কি হয় এইখিনি বস্তুৰ ওপৰত আমি অকমান গুৰুত্ব দিব লাগিব। That limitation, যেতিয়া আমি লিমিটেশনৰ কথাখিনি কওঁ তেতিয়া আমি এটা কথা মন দিব লাগিব, several important institution, it was often racially biased without considering an underlying genetic variation. আৰু এটা বস্তু, this approach খিনি যিবোৰ approach আমি use কৰো anthropological approaches, সেই approachৰ মাজত that আমি এখিনি চাই যাব লাগিব। আৰু এটা বস্তু, the approach sometimes like a sometimes its approach promoted the ideas of racial superiority and which are scientifically incorrect and ethically problematic. তো কিছুমান যদি আমি জেনেটিক্স যেহেতু কৈছো কামটা জেনেটিক আগতে কৈছো কাম জেনেটিক লেবৰ অসুবিধা, so on that time কি হয় আমি that when the human being was produced, on that time onwards we trying to do all this work. Then because it really human or origin measurement, it could not explain the course of human creativity and evolutionary relationship. আৰু এটা বস্তু কৈছে কি আমি ইটো ৰিলেশনশিপত বেসিক্যালি আমি এই বস্তু চাবলে পাৰা নাই। Observation measurement could not explain the causes of human diversity and evolutionary changes. So evolutionary changes from prehistory to the past and modern. So he কেনেকে সলনি হৈছে and as a colony হোৱাৰ পিছত তাৰ ইম্প্যাক্ট কি হৈছে সেইখিনি বস্তু এটা মন দিব লাগিব। ঠিক আছে। Then application কত আমি ইউজ কৰিম, ইউজ কৰা application of কি traditional modern anthropology have many application. They are used, আমি ইউজ কৰো forensic science, genetics and in anthropological research to examine population history, and they are also help to reconstruct adaptations to an environment of human evolution at all. Together, these methods provides a holistic understanding of human variation and allow anthropologists to analyze the connection between genetics, environment, and culture in shaping human population. আৰু ইয়াতে আমি চাম variation খিনি, approaches খিনি and the populations খিনি কি কেনেকুৱা কি ৰাখিব পাৰি। কাৰণ যেতিয়ালৈকে আমাৰ আন্ডাৰষ্টেণ্ডিংটোৱে ক্লিয়াৰ নহ'ব কি হিউমেন ভেৰিয়েশ্যনৰ, তেতিয়া আমি এলাও কেনেকা কৰিম to analyze the situation about different circumstances. যদি এতিয়া আমি কম্পেৰিজন কৰো, comparison between traditional to the modern. Traditional কি হৈছিলে and modern approaches in biological anthropology differ in their methods, focus and scientific perspective. Traditional approaches mainly relied on physical measurement. Traditional to কি আছিলে তেতিয়া হেতে বেসিক্যালি মেজারমেন্ট কৰিব কি আমি এটা বস্তুক মেজার কৰি চাব লাগিব কি কিমান হাইট, কিমান লেন্থ, কিমান ওয়েট এখিনি চাব লাগিব। তাত চাই কিনে সিহঁতে বায়োলজিক্যাল আইডেন্টিফিকেশন কৰে কি so and so. Then approaches mainly relate the physical measurement, observation, racial classification, whereas modern approaches use genetics. Traditional time focus disile ihote mainly on physical measurement ki ami jukhi mapi ji hoy hinisa observation kori sa aru racial classification kori ki caucasoid, mongoloid, negroid tar bahiroto kiba ase niki jodi ase তেতিয়াহলে তাৰ বিষয়ে চোৱা যাব এন্ড গোটেইখিনি ষ্টাডিবোৰ হল কি সাইন্টিফিক ষ্টাডিটো হয় আৰু মডাৰ্ন এপ্ৰোচেছ কি হল আমি ডেটা আছে এআই আছে কম্পিউটাৰ আছে থ্ৰু দ্যাট উই ক্যান আইডেন্টিফাই ইট so it is also one of the major cause factors to identify from the evolutionary point of view to the present day context. তো আমি ইয়াত গম পালো কি ট্ৰেডিশনাল টাইমত কি খলনি আছিলে এতিয়া কি চেঞ্জেস আহিলে ট্ৰেডিশনাল টাইমত ইহঁতে বেসিক্যালি স্ট্ৰেস দিছিলে মেজারমেন্টের উপরতে অবজারভেশনের উপরতে এন্ড মডার্ন টাইমত বেসিক্যালি ইহঁতে সাইন্টিফিক এপ্রোচত ইম্পর্টেন্স খিনি দিছে এইখিনি বস্তু আমি এটা চাম দেন যদি আমি রিলেট করো বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি টুডেজ এরাত কেনেকুৱাকে আমাক হেল্প কৰে তেতিয়াহ'লে আমি আন এটা কথাও গম পাম কি জেনেটিক ডাইভাৰ্চিটি পাম হেল্থ পাম ডিজিজ প্যাটাৰ্ণবোৰ পাম আগৰ ডিজিজ এতিয়াৰ ডিজিজত আমি বহুত ভেৰিয়েশন পাম হেল্থৰ ক্ষেত্ৰত আমি বহুত মানে সেই ডিফাৰেন্স খিনি পাম দেন যদি আমি জেনেটিক্যালি কৰিবলৈ যাওঁ তেতিয়াও আমি বহুত ডিফাৰেন্স খিনি পাম তো এই ডিফাৰেন্স খিনি ফ্ৰম ট্ৰেডিশনাল পইণ্ট অফ ভিউৰ পৰা at the present context লকে কি ডিফারেন্সেস বোৰ হৈছে আৰু হৈছে যদি কেনেকুৱাকে হৈছে এই গোটেইখিনি বস্তু আমি চাব লগা হয় then আর একটা বস্তু আমি সাম মন দিম বেসিক্যালি কি it also play a important role in medical research তো আমি সাম ki and understanding how humans adapt to environmental and climatic change. In addition, biological anthropology helps in studying migration patterns, nutrition and public health issues, making it useful for both science and society. And এটা কথা আমি ইয়াতে গুৰুত্ব দিম আগতে যেহেতু আমি খালি এভলিউশনারি পার্সপেক্টিভৰ পইণ্টত চাইছিলো আৰু অবজারভেশন এতিয়া ইন মডাৰ্ন ডেজত আমি আৰু কিছুমান বস্তু আমি এতিয়া এড কৰিব পাৰা হৈছো যেটো হল কি মাইগ্ৰেশন প্যাটাৰ্ন যদি খলনি হৈছে এভলিউশনারি পইণ্ট অফ ভিউৰ পৰা তেতিয়াহ'লে আমি মাইগ্ৰেশন প্যাটাৰ্ন খিনি আমি অবজাৰ্ভ কৰিম দেন আমি সাম কি হতে এনেকা খায় খোৱাটো সিস্টেমটো কেনেকুৱা বা way of life to কেনেকুৱা হতে কালচাৰ খিনি কেনেকুৱাকে আৰু কিবা পাবলিক হেলথ ইস্যু আছে then making it useful in both the point science or 2D and it will also help to building the society in a proper way then future kiba scope ase niki ki যেতিয়া আমি বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজিটো স্টাডি কৰি এম খিনি পালো স্কোপ খিনি পালো কি ওয়াইড হয় কি ফিউচার লোকেও কিবা স্টাডি কৰি উলাব পাৰি নেকি yes obviously that's true আমি কৰিব পাৰো আজিকালি আমি জিনোম স্টাডি কৰিব পাৰি আজিকালি আমি বায়ো ইনফৰমেটিক্সৰ স্টাডি কৰিব পাৰি আজিকালি আমি আৰ্টিফিশিয়াল ইন্টেলিজেন্সৰ স্টাডি কৰিব পাৰো এন্ড দ্য বায়োটেকনলজি ফিউচাৰত যদি আমি চাবলৈ যাওঁ বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজিৰ স্কোপ খিনি ওয়াইড not only limited একে বান্ধি থোৱা নাই কি এই পার্টিকুলার স্পেস পার্টিকুলার জায়গা খিনিতে আমি স্টাডি খিনি কৰিম আৰু কৰাৰ পিছত আমি ৰিজাল্ট খিনি আৰু আউটকামস খিনি পাম আমি দেখা পালো কি ফিউচাৰত আমি কিছুমান নিউ সাবজেক্ট নিউ কিছুমান পইণ্টত আমি স্টাডি কৰিব পাৰা হৈছো দেন আন এটা বস্তু আমি এটা গুৰুত্ব দিব লাগিব কিছুমান নিউ টেকনলজিজ আহিলে যেনেকৈ আমি অলৰেডি কলো কি হোল জিনোম সিকুৱেন্সিং খিনি পাম বিগ ডেটা এনালাইসিস খিনি পাম AI based modeling will help anthropologists study the human evolution and the variation accurately. Modern versus traditional সেইখিনি এটা ডিফাৰেন্স খিনি আমি ক'ব পাৰো মেইন ডিফাৰেন্স খিনি কি আগৰ সময়ত যদি আমি ট্ৰেডিশনাল পার্সপেক্টিভত যদি চাবলৈ যাওঁ তেতিয়ালে আমাৰ আছিল অবজারভেশন অবজার্ভ কৰিছিলো আমি বস্তুখিনি আৰু মেজারমেন্ট কৰিছিলো ক্ৰেনিওমেট্ৰি অস্টিওমেট্ৰি হেবোৰ মেজারমেন্ট কৰিছিলো বাট আমি যদি আজি চাবলৈ যাওঁ এট প্ৰেজেন্ট কন্টেক্সটত যদি চাবলৈ যাওঁ তেতিয়ালে আমি দেখা পাম কি এআই আহিলে এআই থ্ৰু দি আমি কিছুমান বস্তু আমি মোৰ একুৰেটলি পাব পাৰো এভিডেন্স খিনি যোনটো জীৱাশ্মৰ খিনি এভিডেন্স আছে বা ফসিলস ৰেকৰ্ড আছে বা নানান ধৰণৰ যিবোৰ এভিডেন্স আছে তাৰ পৰা আমি কিছুমান অথেন্টিসিটিটো টানি আনিব পাৰি দেন biological anthropology role in understanding the impact of globalization এটা এরিয়া লোকে সীমিত থাকা নাই এটা স্টেট লোকে সীমিত থাকা নাই পুরা গ্লোবত আমাৰ যোনটো স্কোপ আৰু ফিউচাৰ ওয়ার্ক অফ biological anthropology আছে then climate change and modern lifestyles on human biology the human biology উপর স্ট্রেস কিনি বাড়ি আহিলে because with the globalization and the changing of climate এই যে climate would change হয়ে গেছে ultimate somehow it's a modern lifestyle like আমি দেখা পাও আজিকালি আমাৰ লাইফস্টাইল বোৰ ফুড হ্যাবিট বোৰ খলনি হৈছে আমাৰ way of behavior was changing খলনি হৈছে তো যদি ইমানে বস্তুবোৰ খলনি হৈ থাকে তো কবাত না কবাত কিবা না কিবা চেঞ্জেস obviously আমি মাইনৰলি অবজার্ভ কৰি পাম then আন এটা কথা আৰু এটা গুৰুত্ব দিব লাগিব যেহেতু কি relevant in the modern world it also help to understand human evolution genetic diversity health and disease pattern ki modern world it helps to understand human evolution genetic diversity and health সুস্থ and the disease pattern যে আজিকালি ইমান ডিজিজবোৰ বাঢ়ি গৈ আছে সেই বাঢ়াৰ ৰিজনটো কি আৰু কৰ পৰা এইখিনি বস্তু ষ্টাৰ্ট হৈছে সেই ষ্টাৰ্টিং পইণ্টটো আমি জানিব লাগিব দেন আন এটা কথা মন দিব লাগিব কি যেতিয়া আমি বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজিৰ কথা কম তেতিয়া আমাৰ কিছুমান লিগেল টাৰ্মৰ কথাবোৰ আহে লাইক আমি কিছুমান সিনেমা সিৰিয়েলতো চাওঁ কি কিছুমান কেसेस কিছুমান ক্রাইম বোৰ হয় সেই ক্রাইমৰ টাইমত আমি বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজিৰ হেল্প ল'ব লাগে তো বায়োলজিক্যাল এন্থ্ৰোপলজি কিছুমান টুলস মেথডস টেকনিক ইজ নট ইনাফ এট প্ৰেজেন্ট কনটেক্সট তো তাৰ পৰা এটা ব্ৰাঞ্চ ওলাই আহিছে সেই ব্ৰাঞ্চটোৰ নাম হল ফৰেনসিক এন্থ্ৰোপলজি তো ফৰেনসিক এন্থ্ৰোপলজি basically identify human remains and solving legal case আৰু ইহঁতে কি কৰে identify কৰিব and try to sort it out the legal issues because যেতিয়া আমি biologicalৰ কথাখিনি কৈছো কি from traditional pointer to the present context বহুত খলনি হৈছে খলনি হলে কিছুমান হে rules and regulationৰ কথাখিনিও আহি যায়গে যেতিয়া rules and regulationৰ কথা আহিব তেতিয়া we are taking the help of forensic anthropology তো forensic anthropology নিজৰ methods technique use কৰি কিনে হি কেস or হি legal perspective কিছুমান ক্ষেত্ৰত হেল্প কৰিব পাৰা হৈছে then in addition আমি আৰু এটা চাম বস্তু that is hall ki biological anthropology is also help in nutrition and public health issues nutrition or কথাখিনিও গুৰুত্ব দিয়া হয় nutrition perspective to অকমান সোৱা হয় কি হতৰ যিবোৰ খলনি হয় কিবা ফুড হ্যাবিটৰ কাৰণে হয় নেকি এতিয়া জাগা লাইক কবা ধৰক আপোনাৰ হে ঠাণ্ডা জাগা হওক গৰম জাগা হওক যত যিনখিনি জাগা সেই জাগাবোৰৰ ফুড হ্যাবিটস টু অকমান ডিফাৰ হয় তো যদি আমি ঠাণ্ডা জাগাটোত যাওঁ তাতে কিবা এটা খলনি দেখা পাম গৰম জাগাটোত আহোঁ তাতে এটা কিবা খলনি দেখা পাম তো ইন both ways কিছুমান আমি চেঞ্জেস টু পাইছো then it also help both science and society because society যেতিয়া a group of people aggregate of a group of people who are living together and sharing their ideas thoughts behavior emotions to the other so on that time also that আমি এটা রিলেশনশিপ দেখা পাওঁ because it will relate হৈ আছে societyৰ লগত and যদি আমি আন এটা পার্সপেক্টিভ লকে যাও যদি আমি কম্পেয়ার যদি কৰো তেতিয়ালে আমি কিছুমান এপ্ৰোচেছ খিনি দেখা পাম আৰু ইহঁতে বেসিক্যালি ফোকাস এখিনি মানে এরিয়া খিনি দিয়ে কিন্তু ফোকাস শুড বি ইন আ সাইন্টিফিক ওয়ে হ'ব লাগিব যদি সাইন্টিফিক ওয়ে নহয় তেতিয়াহলে আমি এক্সাক্ট একুরেট ডেটাস খিনি নাপাম and traditional approaches mainly relied on physical measurement আৰু হেতু বেসিক্যালি বেস কৰা হৈছে ফিজিক্যাল মেজারমেন্টত যেটো ট্ৰেডিশনাল টাইমত ইউজ কৰিছিল as I already spoke that কি ট্ৰেডিশনাল টাইমত হিহঁতে বেসিক্যালি এইখিনি ওপৰত স্ট্ৰেস দিছিল কি দেখা পাইছে এটা হিউম্যান বিংত তাৰ মেজারমেন্ট খিনি কিমান আৰু হেতু কৰি কিনে দে কম্পাইল ইট আৰু স্টাডি কৰিছিল বা ৰিপৰ্ট পঠাইছিল বাট ইন দ্য মডার্ন প্রেজেন্ট কনটেক্সটত যদি আমি চাবলৈ যাওঁ হিপো তেনেকুৱাকে নচলিবগে that হৈছে কি use genetics molecular biology and interdisciplinary scientific technique তেখেতে কৈছে that in traditional time কিছুমান observation থাকে হি observation and the measurement কিটা accurate হ'ব পাৰে কিটা হ'ব নোৱাৰে so এতিয়া যদি আমি চাবলৈ যাওঁ এটা অবজেক্টিভ লৈ কিনে কি আজিকালি তেনেকুৱা নহয় with the help of AI with the help of ergonomics with the help of other social mechanism or the methods through dio আমি কিছুমান বস্তু গম পাব পাৰো very easily তো আমি আইডিয়া খিনি গম পালো আইডিয়াস খিনি তেনেকা ট্ৰেডিশনাল পার্সপেক্টিভত তেনেকুৱাকে আইডিয়াস আছিল হি আইডিয়াস খিনি আমি মাইনুটলি স্টাডি কৰিলে আমি গম পাম বস্তুখিনি কি কেনেকুৱাকে কি আগবঢ়াই লৈ যাব লাগা হয় দেন আমি এপ্ৰোচেছৰ কথাখিনি আহিলো এপ্ৰোচেছ হল টু ৱে দুটা ফালত হ'ব লাইক এটা হল আমি ট্ৰেডিশনাল আন এটা হ'ব মডার্ন কি ট্ৰেডিশনাল টাইমৰ হিহঁতে এপ্ৰোচ খিনি কেনেকুৱা আছিল wherever the social scientists they went in their areas study areas so on that time how they are given their responses how they are treating to us and everything they can study it then আৰু এটা কথা আহিব ইয়াতে মন দিব লাগা যেহেতু modern biological anthropology have many applications তো ট্ৰেডিশনাল টাইমত এপ্লিকেশনস বোৰ ইমান ডেভেলপ হোৱা নাছিলে মডার্ন টাইমত ইমান মানে বস্তুখিনি ডেভেলপ হৈছে তাক আমি এটা কম্পেয়ার কৰিব পাৰো ইন আউট in later phases then they also help to reconstruct ki amar tat evidence nai ki human being from evolve from which period but scientific way nai but traditional time but modern time আমি যেতিয়া fossils বা radiocarbon dating method বা different methods আছে বা Florence schemes methods বা whatever methods through that methods through দি আমি identify কৰিব পাৰি কি এইটো সময়ত that the leaf or the human being or their impressions আছে কি নাই যদি নাই তেতিয়া হলে আমি তাক অ্যাডাপ্ট কৰিব নোৱাৰো কিন্তু নাই থাকিলে যদি নো কোৱা হয় তেতিয়ালে এডিশনাল চাৰ্জেছত আমি হি বস্তুখিনি ভৰাই লৈ আহিব পাৰো আৰু এটা কথা দিব লাগিব মন কি ইয়াতে holistic যেহেতু টপিকটো হল biological anthropology but the anthropology is given the focus on like holistic understanding ki amar majot in that areas we should follow the biological norms and ideas kini ami follow koribo lagibo দেন কিছুমান টেকনিকৰ কথাখিনি আহিলে কি মডাৰ্ণ টুলছ এণ্ড টেকনিক কি মডাৰ্ণ ডেজত কেনেকুৱাকৈ সিহঁতে কি কি টুলছ লয় কি কি মেথডছ ইউজ কৰে এইখিনি বস্তুৰ ওপৰতো আমি গুৰুত্ব দিম Then, DNA testing is used to study the variation, ancestry, and the evolutionary relationship among population. Radiocarbon dating help to determine, as I already told you, that radiocarbon dating methods, Florence methods, and these all methods are important. So, at that time, if you can mention anyone there will be also no problem for that but the thing is that ki archaeological remains kini study koribole amar kisuman fossils record lagibo aru fossils record or jibur evidence ache tar karone amar radioactive decay korabo lagibo ba amar prehistory kor pora help lobo lagibo then CT scan and imaging technique allow researchers to study the bone and soft tissue without damaging specimen. So government has provided certain specimen on that basis আমি কিছুমান খলনি কৰিব পাৰো বা কিছুমান চেঞ্জেস আমি অবজার্ভ কৰিব পাৰো লাইক আজিকালি আমি দেখা পাওঁ হাত যদি ভৰি ভাঙি যাব হাত ভাঙি তো আমি এটা ৰেপ্লিকা বোন আমি লগাব পাৰো তো হি ৰেপ্লিকা বোন and that in the difference not only the bone in other materials and things is also working for that are using and in addition আমি আরেকটা সর্বপরি বস্তুটো কি যেহেতু মই কলোই অলরেডি bioinformatics help to analyze genetics large and classify and stimulate evolutionary process and making modern research more precise and interdisciplinary. Then advantage of modern approaches. Modern approaches are then used to traditional and the modern. Itla modern approaches are ki advantage hobo pare. Studies of human genetic diversity shows the African population at the highest level. Yes, আমি দেখা পাইছো কি সিহঁতৰ যোনবোৰ কণ্ডিশ্যন এনভাইৰনমেণ্টেল কণ্ডিশ্যনৰ পৰা আমাৰ কণ্ডিশ্যনত কিছুমান ডিফাৰেন্স খিনি থাকে then African population have the highest level of genetic variation তো African population মাজত আমি দেখা পাইছো কি যোনটো ভেৰিয়েচন হৈ থাকে অসমীয়াৰ মাজত বেংগলীৰ মাজত বিহাৰীৰ মাজত any other community মাজত হে সেম তেনেকুৱাকে আমি কিছুমান বস্তু আমি দেখা পাইছো কি human evolve in the African genetic diversity also. Then understanding this diversity helps anthropologists reconstruct human migration and population structure. DNA also studies and provides insight into how genetic variation influence the variations adaptation to the people and into the different conditions the factors accessibility to disease and the physical traits in different population the different community different areas or bemar bor belag ke hoi thake because the food habits dietary habits and the daily routine it should be a differ so eta khomat eta jaga ba eta locality eke type or bemar what is impossible different jaga burat ha and different methods are also there with that methods ami tak ag badhai loi jabo paro in the modern days and the person was not too much of suffered about the disease then mitochondria DNA কথা যদি কবলে যাও তেতিয়া হলে unchanged that inherited only from the mother and is passed down relative unchanged so মাকৰ পৰা যিবোৰ DNA আহিছে বাচ্চালকে হে DNA কিবা খলনি হৈছে নেকি যদি DNA টুত খলনি হৈছে তেতিয়া হলে you should take that another DNA mRNA but DNA হে তেনেকুৱা because ইয়াতে বেসিক্যালি মাইটোকন্ড্রিয়াল ডিএনএ কথাটো এটা বস্তু ফোকাস দিছে যোনটো mRNA mRNA টু কি হয় mRNA টু হল তোমাৰ মেসেঞ্জার RNA যোনটো আমি at the time of F1 generation আমি কি কৰিব পাৰো এই বস্তুবোৰক ইভালুৱেট কৰি ল'ব পাৰো then mRNA mDNA and it also studies how critical conforming is out of Africa theory showing the modeling structure organized in African later disposal. So, teneka eko kotha nohoy ki earlier times or when they came, the Africans people they came. So on that time they have adapted. They have not shown their face to anyone. That should also a good. যদি তেনেকুৱাকে আগবাঢ়িব পাৰিবা কোনোবা যদি ৰিজাৰ্ভ কৰিব পাৰিবা ডেটাখিনি ৰাখিব পাৰিবা কিন্তু আমাৰ তাত যেহেতু অলৰেডি মই ক'লোৱে কি ডিএনএ ইনস্পেকশন ডিএনএ ৰিলেটেড এনি মেটাৰ যদি আমি ডিসকাস কৰিব লগা হয় তেতিয়া হলে আমাৰ এখন জেনেটিক ল্যাবৰ দৰকাৰ তাত আমি বস্তুখিনি ষ্টাডি কৰিব পাৰো then advantage and the tools advantage খিনি কলো কি modern tools and techniques and tools আছে হেবোৰ ইউজ কৰা হয় এটো ইউজ কৰিলে at least যিখিনি আমি accurate data 100% accurate data খিনি উলাই আহিলে হেতেন and here also they can mention the different types of population into different belt areas. So when the different types of belt areas, different population, obviously the diseases which are occurring, jibur bemar hoy, hetu kunba eta manuhor pora ahi ase, but when they are sleep, eat and roam in the outside, obviously the certain more diseases will to come. তাৰ মাজত আমি এটা লিমিটেশনৰ কথাখিনিও কৈ যাওঁ লিমিটেশনটো হল কি কিছুমান ক্ষেত্ৰত আমি ডিএনএ ষ্টাডিটো কৰিব নোৱাৰো এজ আই অলৰেডি টোল্ড ইউ দ্যাট ডিএনএ ষ্টাডিটো কৰিব লগা হলে আমাৰ বহুত পাৰমিশনৰ দৰকাৰ এন্ড দ্য অৰ্ডাৰস অলসো ৰিকোয়াৰ্ড কাৰণ যেতিয়া আমি বায়োলজিক্যাল এনথ্ৰোপলজিত আমি যেতিয়া জেনেটিক্সৰ ষ্টাডি কৰি ইন ভাৰ্বালি আমি ক'ব পাৰো কি আমাক ষ্টোন বোল্ডাৰ্স লাগে আমাক সেইখিনি বস্তু লাগে অন দ্যাট বেसिस বাট when you studied about the modern like anthropology in modern approach তেতিয়া কথাটো আহিব কি basically stress on the modern approach কিন্তু modern versus tradition দিয়াৰ মাজত এটা correlation হ'ব লাগে and যেতিয়া correlation টো থাকিব তেতিয়া আমি research or investigation বোৰ আগবঢ়াই লৈ যাব পাৰো কিন্তু ডিএনএ ইনভেস্টিগেশন কৰিব লাগা যদি হয় তেতিয়া আমাৰ ethical permission টো ল'ব লাগিব Then DNA also provide the detailed genetic information. কেতিয়াবা এনেকা কে হয় কি আমি কিছুমান কেसेस পাও এই কেসটো কেতিয়াবা আমি দেখা পাও কি ডিএনএ মানে লাইক কিছুমান অথেন্টিসিটি লাগে কিছুমান পারমিশন লাগে বিকজ জেনেটিক স্টাডি কৰাটো kind of huge infrastructure is also required DNA lab lagibo permission lagibo government apart তেতিয়া আমি study খিনি আগবঢ়াই লৈ যাব পাৰো otherwise with the help of biological anthropology at the time of 1951 to at the time of 2026 there are vast difference ami modern versus traditional then we come to the point that is the last, that is the conclusion. The traditional and modern approaches together provide the comprehensive understanding of human biological variation and evolution. Ki আমি যেতিয়া জানিব বিচাৰিম কি কেনেকুৱাকে ষ্টাডি কৰিব পাৰি হেতু কাৰণে ট্ৰেডিশনাল আৰু মডাৰ্ন দুটাৰে আমাৰ দৰকাৰ আৰু সেইখিনি আমি holistic way study koribo lagibo aru biological anthropology khodai continue to important field to understand human scientifically socially and biologically with this we can conclude here again stay tuned to the next unit namaskar